Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Ultimate AFL Show, and today it's coming to you from the MCG, the home of footy. It is the heart of Melbourne if you're a sports fan, and it's just the place to go if you love your sport, and it is the place to go if you want to watch footy really. There's nothing that beats it at all. Now I thought I'm in Melbourne for the weekend, so why not do an episode of this, record it at this ground instead of doing it at my studio. So we've got a big episode coming up. I'm going to be looking back at what was a ripper opening round of the AFL. It was just absolutely extraordinary. We had some blowouts that we didn't expect. We had some close games, and it was just a great round of footy to watch. So that is coming up, and of course a look towards round 2, which is going to be a cracker. Of course, Friday night we're looking towards that. That is going to be a interesting game to look at. Of course, both teams having interesting starts to the season. But anyway, let's look back at round 1, the opening round of the AFL. So of course it started right here at the MCG on Thursday night between Richmond and Carlton. Traditional opening game of the season, traditional rivals as well actually. And well, it was an interesting game. I had a funny feeling during the day that it was going to be close and that Carlton was going to give a bit more than what they have in the NAB Challenge. And you know, they were showing signs in the NAB Challenge but making silly mistakes, which was very, very putting off people sort of thing. So they gave it a real good crack, but Richmond in the end were able to come away with the points 14-8-92, defeating Carlton 12-11-83. So a good win for Richmond, I guess. They got the 4 points in the end, that's the main thing. But obviously there is some things to work on, of course, with the big outs as well. They had Deledio, obviously Avan Marriage, and just trying to think of the other names they had out as well. They had a few more out as well, and you know, that probably cost them a bit in the end, but they got the 4 points, and that's the main thing. The goal kickers, Vickery kicked 3, Mandu kicked 2, as well as Rewalt and Lloyd. Lambert kicked a single, as well as Edwards, Musselin, Ellis and Miles. Well, the goal kickers for Carlton, Wright kicked 3, Everett kicked 2, he had a good game. Lamb kicked 1, Gibbs kicked 1, as well as Cruiser, Murphy, Cripps, Phillips and Walker, they kicked 1. So it was a brilliant opener. It was good to see Carlton giving it a real good crack, and they might surprise teams this year. Okay, so Friday there were no games, of course. Good Friday, there's still no AFL game on Good Friday. It was a bit weird. It felt weird last year, same this year. You had that, you know, opening game on Thursday night, and then you got to Friday and there was no footy. It was a bit weird. So hopefully next year there's a Good Friday game. Probably Friday night, I would say. I'd be very surprised if they put a day game on Good Friday. I think Friday night they should just stick to that on Good Friday. You know, I think it just ruin it if they put, you know, 2 games or something on Good Friday. Just the Friday night game will do. Let me know your thoughts. But anyway, Saturday, back here at the MCG, Melbourne and GWS. It was GWS's only home and away game at the MCG for this year. Whether they play finals here or not is another question. But Melbourne come away with the win, but GWS actually took the lead off them in the second quarter and actually led pretty convincingly towards the third quarter. So they were really well in front at three-quarter time, 8-14 to 6-5 Melbourne. But Melbourne extraordinarily came back and won the match, 12-8-80, defeating Greater Western Sydney Giants 10-18-78. So a 2-point win to the Melbourne Demons. GWS, did Jeremy Cameron cost them a little bit with his suspension? Maybe, but Melbourne, they have won and they are still undefeated for this season, including the NAB Challenge. The goal kickers, Hogan kicked 3, Garlick kicked 2, Vandenberg kicked 2 also, and then Vince Kennedy, Harmers, Kent and Watts kicked singles each. While for Greater Western Sydney, Ward kicked 2, as well as Lobb and Johnson, who was playing his first game for the GWS Giants in a home and away game. Scully, Smith, Steele and Green kicked singles each. The next game was at Metricon Stadium, Gold Coast and Essendon. Interesting game, of course. We're all awaiting how Essendon go this season. Of course, Will they win a game? Will they, go a season winless? This was an interesting game, I reckon, for them, and I mentioned that last week on last week's episode. It was an interesting game for them, and they got, I wouldn't say smashed, but they got pretty dominated and didn't take any of the lead in the match. So Gold Coast won convincingly, 17-19, 121, defeating Essendon 9-6-60. Great win for the Gold Coast Suns. Of course, a poor year last year. Of course, Gary Ablett out all season last year. Came back and had a terrific game. And the goal kickers for Gold Coast, Lynch got 4, Martin and Day and Hall got 2 each. Hall was actually the highest disposal getter for this game. The Tasmanian, very good player, and he showed that in this game. Ouchie, Maleski, Lonigan, Miller, Sexton, Prestilia and Ablett kicked singles each, while for Essendon, Stokes kicked 3 on his debut for his new club. Zara Rakas kicked 2, McKernan, Danaher, Crowley and Langford kicked singles each. Saturday night at Etihad Stadium, it was North Melbourne and Adelaide. This was probably the game of the Saturday night, really. Of course, Sydney Swans and Collingwood was an interesting one before that actual game. We'll get to that in just a minute, but this one was an interesting one at Etihad Stadium. Adelaide took the lead at quarter time, 3-5 to 2-3 North Melbourne. They were then really in front at half time, 9-6 to 6-6. It was close at 3/4 time. It was Adelaide by a point, so it was very interesting. And then in the end, North Melbourne were able to break their round 1 hoodoo. They haven't won a round 1 game under Brad Scott, and of course, like I said last week, they got smashed by Adelaide in the round 1 game against them last year at Adelaide Oval. So they got their revenge and won this round 1 fixture, 16-11, 107 to Adelaide, 14-13, 97. Very close in the end, of course, a 10-point margin there. Goal kickers, Waite kicked 3 as well as Harvey, Brown kicked 2, Gardner kicked 2 as well as Petrie, Goldstein, Higgins and Dal Santo kicked singles each, while for Adelaide, Jenkins kicked 5, Walker kicked 2, Betts, Crouch, Douglas, Jacobs, Lynch, McKay and Seedsman, who came from Collingwood this year, they all kicked singles. It was an interesting game at Etihad Stadium on Saturday night. The other game on Saturday night was in Sydney at the SCG. Of course, this game got moved from ANZ to the SCG. Great decision, of course, by the Sydney Swans, and well, it was great to see the opening game for Sydney being at the SCG as opposed to ANZ Stadium. They were against Collingwood. I thought this would be close. In fact, you might remember I tipped Collingwood last week. I thought they were going to win it. I thought it was going to be close, but it was far from that. Sydney Swans actually smashed them. They kicked 3 goals, 9 Sydney in the first quarter to Collingwood, 1-1. So it was kind of close at quarter time, but then this is where Sydney really put the foot down and Collingwood really lost the plot. Sydney Swans led at half time, 10-12 to Collingwood, 1-4. They only kicked 3 behinds in the second quarter. Not very good from Collingwood at all, considering you've got Cloak and players like that. And Cloak, well, he hadn't had a disposal at half time. He had no disposals next to his name. It was just incredible. And then Sydney, they just powered on in the end and just won very convincingly, 18-25, 133 to Collingwood, 7-11, 53. Dane Swan critically injured in the game. In fact, it could be a season-ending injury, and well, it could possibly force him to retire. I probably doubt it. I think he'll get through and probably get back somewhere towards the end of the season, but it's not good for Collingwood at all. The goal kickers, Franklin was back in form basically, 4 goals, very good performance by him. Mitchell kicked 3 as well as Padley. Cunningham kicked 2, Hewitt, Towers, Hanbury, Parker, Jones and Heaney kicked singles each. While for Collingwood, Greenwood, Crisp, De Gooey, Moore, Fasolo, Treloar, who had a very good debut for Collingwood. I think he was the highest disposal getter for Collingwood in the match, and Maynard got singles each. So not very good for Collingwood. No real positives to take out of that really, and they were smashed in all areas. Just on Cloak, by the way, I think Collingwood really need to start looking at who they're going to bring in as a tall forward, because I don't think he cuts it for the side anymore. I think they should be recruiting a good tall forward for them, because he just doesn't get enough of the ball. He doesn't get in the right areas. And I don't know where he was playing on Saturday night, but I saw him playing in the ruck at one stage, and I thought, why is he in the ruck? He's not predominantly a ruckman. He should be up forward because they really have no one else. They have Fasolo and stuff like that, but, you know, Cloak should be there in the full forward or half forward there, marking the ball for Collingwood. It was unbelievable. We had no disposals at half-time. So Sydney Swans, big win. A lot of people have pushed them out of the top 8 this year. I don't think it's going to go there. I don't think it's going to be like that if they play like this. And if Franklin is in form, then they might be in form as well. Tippett, though, he was disappointing. Sunday afternoon, there were 3 games highlighted on the Sunday. It started at Etihad Stadium between the Western Bulldogs and Fremantle. I was at this game, and I have to say, being a dog supporter, I was so happy at the end of it because it was a very good display by the Western Bulldogs. I probably didn't expect it coming. In fact, I thought it would be closer than what it was, but the Western Bulldogs really did blow out Fremantle, basically blew them out of the game by quarter time, basically. That's how one-sided it pretty much was. It wasn't probably as one-sided as the Sydney game, but they just blew them out of the park, really, especially in the first quarter. 7-1, the Bulldogs, to Freo 0-2. They blew them out in the first quarter. That is how good the Dogs were. And even at half-time, the score was 9-7, the Dogs, to Fremantle 1-5. So they only restricted them to 1 goal. So the first half was pretty woeful by Fremantle, but so good by the Western Bulldogs. And then in the end, the Dogs won 15-13, 103 to Fremantle, 5-8, 38. The Western Bulldogs goal kickers, Stringer kicked 5. He was superb. He'll win the Coleman medal this year. That's my tip at least. Bontempelli, Liberatore, McLean, Johannesson, Dunkley, Roughhead, Suckling, Boyd, McRae and Daniels kicked singles each. So there's only 1 multiple goal kicker for the Dogs in that game. The rest were just single kickers. Very, very, very impressive, that's for sure. The goal kickers for Fremantle, Walters, Serpent, Tabernar, Weller and Pavlich kicked singles between them. So, yeah, very good win by the Western Bulldogs. I wouldn't be too worried if you're a Fremantle supporter because I reckon they'll get back on the train next week, get the win. I'm sure they'll be back up and in the top 3. I still think they're a good quality side. Just the game, Bulldogs were too good, it's simple as that. 3:20 as the wind starts to blow here at the MCG. It was Port Adelaide St Kilda at Adelaide Oval. The final score being 20-13, 133 to St Kilda, 15-10, 100. It was close all day. In fact, St Kilda had the lead at quarter time, half time and 3/4 time. So they were, they were in it for most of the game, but in the end, Port Adelaide were able to run over the top of them, and I think that's what really got them in the end, and probably why St Kilda lost it is because in the 4th quarter they had a lot more run speed, a lot more legs to finish the game. Port Adelaide, goal kickers Gray, Wingard, Harlett, Ebert, Westhoff and Gray kicked singles between them, while Stephen, Armitage, Hickey, Ross, Weller, Fisher, Newlands kicked singles for St Kilda. No multiple goal kickers in that game. Second last game of the weekend was at Domain Stadium in Perth. West Coast finished the game pretty convincingly, 26-10, 166 to Brisbane, 15-12, 102. The goal kickers, Kennedy kicked 8, which was the highest for the weekend. A very good display by him, while Cripps and Hill kicked 3. Darling kicked 2, as well as Bennell, who kicked 2. Nadanui kicked 2, as well as LaCroix, and McGovern kicked a single, while for the Brisbane Lions, Taylor kicked 3, as well as Christian. Skay kicked 2. Rockcliffe, Walker also kicked 2, as well as Rich, and Hanley kicked a single for the Lions. And the final game of the round was here at the MCG, the traditional Easter Monday clash between Hawthorn and Geelong. I was in this stadium on Easter Monday watching this game. It was a fantastic game. Geelong put the foot on the pedal early and went right on until the 3rd quarter, when Hawthorn came back and were able to have the lead at 3/4 time. So it was a very, very good game of football, and Geelong just put the accelerator down in the 4th quarter and was able to win the match, 18-8, 116 to Hawthorn, 12-14, 86. The goal kickers, Smith kicked 3, Caddy kicked 3, as well as Lang. McCarthy kicked 2, Hawkins kicked 2 as well. Motlop, Blickarves kicked a single, as well as Guthrie and Murdoch. While for Hawthorn, Palopolo kicked 3, as well as Gunston. Langford kicked 2, Bruce kicked 2, Burgoyne and Hardtone kicked singles each. Just some talking points out of the match. Smith, he was really good on debut for Geelong, absolutely outstanding. For Hawthorn, no tall forwards at all. Roughhead, we know he's out. He's out for a long period of time this year. He's not going to get back until the back end of the season. So it's a bit of a worry because, you know, they have Gunston and so forth, but they have no real tall marker to actually be in that forward line. So that was a bit of a concern, and that's really what let them down pretty much in the end. They just had no forwards, and also the pressure from Geelong, really outstanding. And, well, I can't go without mentioning Dangerfield. He was absolutely outstanding on debut for Geelong. He had the highest disposals of the game. He's probably the highest player to have the highest disposals in his debut game for his new club. He was that outstanding. He missed a few silly ones, that probably let him down a little bit, but nonetheless, he got about 40-odd disposals. Absolutely great player. He's going to be a real influence for Geelong this year. And I know one-man players don't normally influence a club, but he is one of those players. I tell you what, he's a unique player, and he was just outstanding at this ground. He just knows his ground well, and great game. Okay, time to finish the opening round review off with the stats and, of course, the ladder, of course, who's on top of the ladder after the opening round of the 2016 season. It was a fantastic opening round, as I mentioned. For the Coleman medal, Josh Kennedy is on top with 8 goals. Jenkins and Stringer are there with 5 goals each. Lynch also there with 4 goals, and Franklin rounds out the top 5 on 4 goals. So they're your top 5 Coleman medal leaders so far after the opening round. As for the ladder, the Western Bulldogs are on top after their convincing win over the Fremantle Dockers on Sunday in this round. Fremantle are actually on the bottom of the ladder. I'm not sure if that happens often. The minor premiers finishing on top and then in round 1 being on the bottom of the ladder. I'm not too sure. I'd love to actually check up on that who the last team was to finish minor premiers and then on the bottom of the ladder the next season after round 1. That's an interesting stat to look at. We then had Sydney Swans on second, of course, very convincing win against the Pies. Gold Coast third, West Coast fourth, Geelong fifth, Port Adelaide sixth, Richmond seventh, and North Melbourne eighth. Melbourne very closely on ninth after their 2-point win against the Giants. Okay, time to have a look at round 2. Very interesting round, this one. There's some good games of football in this round. There's no doubt about it. It starts on Friday night here at this very beautiful ground in Melbourne. It is Collingwood and Richmond starting at 7:50. The first Friday night game of the year, by the way. Of course, last Friday, no game for Good Friday, of course. So that game, 7:50, as I mentioned, at the MCG this Friday. We then move on to Saturday, and it starts with a showdown at Adelaide Oval at 1:45 p.m. It is Adelaide and Port Adelaide, an early season showdown. That will be very interesting. The Adelaide Oval, it will be packed, so get there, watch it. It will be a fantastic game, of course. Adelaide losing, Port Adelaide only winning by 33 points. But yeah, it'll be an interesting game, no doubt about it. At the MCG, Essendon and Melbourne starting at 2:10 p.m. Can Melbourne make it 2 wins in a row? It'd be fantastic, wouldn't it, for those Demon fans out there? Of course, Essendon, can they get their first win of the season? That would really push the people off the back saying, oh, they're not going to get a win. I highly doubt it, though, that they'll win this game, because Melbourne have absolutely been fantastic from the NAB Challenge right through to round 1. So going to be a very interesting game. Melbourne should win that game at 2:10 p.m. At the Gabba, it is the Brisbane Lions and North Melbourne. Of course, North Melbourne, I think they go up there sometimes and they lose that game, so it'll be an interesting game. That game starting at 4:35 p.m. not local time, sorry, Australian Eastern time. And then Saturday night football, there are 2 games like always at Etihad Stadium right across Docklands over there. It is St Kilda and the Western Bulldogs. That will be an interesting clash. I don't think the Bulldogs will have it their own way, because St Kilda always seem to put up a good contest against the Dogs, but if they do what they did on Sunday, they'll win pretty convincingly, that's for sure. That game starting at 7:25 p.m, while at Domain Stadium at 7:40 p.m. Australian Eastern Time, it is Fremantle and the Gold Coast Suns. A must-win game for Fremantle if they want to get back into this season. Sunday, 3 interesting games. There are 2 in Melbourne, 1 in Sydney. It all starts, Canberra, It all starts in Canberra at Manuka Oval. The GWS playing their first home game of the season at Canberra. They're up against the Geelong Cats, of course. Stevie J against his old side. We cannot forget that. That game starting at 1:10 p.m. Of course, Geelong very convincing here at the MCG against Hawthorn on Easter Monday. So if they perform like that, they'll win this game, I reckon. We then move on, 3:20 p.m. at the MCG, right here at the MCG, the grand final rematch between Hawthorn and the West Coast Eagles. That will be an interesting game, of course. West Coast won their first game of the season at Domain Stadium. Hawthorn, they'll be very bullish after losing that game here. So, yeah, that game is going to be a very good game indeed. 3:20 p.m. start for that game. Finally, at Etihad Stadium, Carlton take on Sydney. They only took on each other about 2 or 3 weeks ago in a NAB Challenge game at the very same venue. I was there that day, so they meet again for the first time this season. Carlton and Sydney, 4:40 p.m. at Etihad Stadium. Might be an interesting game. I don't reckon Sydney will have it their own way, but they should be able to power on and win this game. It'll be interesting to watch. Okay, so let's finish the episode with my tips for round 2. It'll be an interesting round, no doubt about that. It starts on Friday night, as I mentioned, Collingwood, Richmond. I'm going to go Richmond, a close win. I think it'll be a good game, but I think Richmond will power away and win. Collingwood, very disappointing on Saturday night, and Nathan Buckley, he actually has a lot of work to do, and if he doesn't do it sooner, then I think everyone will be calling on him to be sacked. That's just my opinion anyway. I'm going to go, I'm not sure who to go for the showdown. I'm not really sure at all. I think I'm just going to go, Adelaide back at Adelaide Oval. I think they've won most of the derbies, I think, but Port Adelaide, I'm not really sure on the stat on that, so I might be wrong. Don't take my word for it, but I think Adelaide is going to win that closely. Melbourne should win against Essendon at the MCG. Melbourne, much better list than Essendon. So, yeah, they should win. They were very, very good to win by 2 points here at the G on Saturday, of course, coming back from the margin they were coming from. At the Gabba on Saturday, I'm going to go with the Kangaroos to defeat Brisbane to get their 2nd straight win of the season. The Dogs, of course, I'm tipping the Dogs, being a Dogs supporter, against St Kilda on Saturday night. Fremantle should bounce back against the Gold Coast Suns. On Sunday, I'm going to tip Geelong to win against the GWS Giants. They'll be in the top 8 this year if they play like they did on Easter Monday. There's no doubt about that. I'm going to tip West Coast very close against Hawthorn. I think they were very good against Brisbane Lions. Hawthorn, like I said, I'm a bit worried with them because of their no tall forwards. You know, a lot of clubs don't have tall forwards and actually do well, and I understand that, but I think, you know, with Roughhead, I think they're used to kind of slotting it in to Roughhead. Well, sort of, but anyway, I think they'll closely win against Hawthorn, and then Sydney should win against Carlton to get their 2nd straight win of the season. Going to be an interesting round 2, very much looking forward to it. And that brings this episode of the Ultimate AFL Show to a close. I hope you enjoyed it here from the MCG. Look at it, it's just so beautiful. It's a great ground to watch football. Nothing can beat it, let's face it. Don't forget to like, comment and share this video. Don't forget to subscribe. I do not only this show, I also do the Big Australian Racing Show. So if you like your racing, like your horse racing in Victoria, Sydney, whatever, check out that show because I cover every Group 1. I cover the best of the best in feature racing, so go check that out. I debuted the show last week, and I love my racing. It's my 2nd favourite sport to AFL, so go check that out. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Bevob5. I'm always tweeting. Of course, at Bevob5P is the Bevob5 Productions Twitter page. Go follow them. And that's it from me. Until next Wednesday, I'll be back with another episode next Wednesday, back in the studio for another episode of the Ultimate AFL Show. So until then, I'm Jacob. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the opening round. I hope you enjoyed round 2. Hope you back a winner. Hope you get your tips right. Until next week, bye for now.